Hello. Let's do states of consciousness. So I told you guys my lecture is a little, I feel it's kind of thin because a lot of this stuff we either would do like minimal lecture, a lot of your own work, or in some cases I usually just send kids home with a packet of worksheets and processing guides, and they do this unit on their own over like spring break or whatever, or weekend. You can watch my video, but if you're still wondering more about like especially like some of the more detailed examples, I think of like altered states or drugs and states of consciousness, that would be something to definitely watch one of the Mandy Rice videos about. But I will give you what I usually have and go over the PowerPoints that's posted in my Google site page. Hopefully it helps a little bit. So when we look at consciousness, it's just our awareness of ourselves or our environment, or maybe lack thereof. We go through a lot of different states of consciousness, so it's not either you're awake or you're asleep. There's a lot of in between there, depending on what kind of state of mind you're in, or in this case, level of consciousness that you're exposed to. So I know in one of the AP review books, sorry, my cat's trying to escape the house by ripping the screen. They will ask about the different stages of consciousness. I think the Barron's one has it listed like, what are the 5 levels of consciousness? I don't know. It's going to be things. So conscious, like you're aware. So you're awake, but you're aware of your surroundings, what you're currently thinking about. Non-conscious, it's going to be things that you don't think about that are happening. So like heartbeat, digestion, things that are keeping you alive that, you know that are happening, but you're not thinking about them. Preconscious is information that you could bring to the surface if you wanted to. So if I asked you when's your birthday, or what state is to the west of us, something like that, you could bring up this information, but you're not currently always thinking about it. Subconscious is information that we're not consciously aware of, but we know must exist due to behavior. So like mere exposure, effect, or priming, 2 things we've talked about. Those would fit into that category. And then we have the unconscious, which is very Freudian, right? And it's the idea that like we have a lot of repressed feelings and thoughts and desires that live there. Now, besides the 5 levels of conscious or 5 types of consciousness, you also have different states that we can be in. So this is like a sample listing of it, just to get you away from the idea that you're either awake or asleep. That's not it. You can have these spontaneous states, physiological, or even psychological states. So others can include simple things like sleeping or waking, or drug use, dreaming, daydreaming. If you kind of space off for a moment, that counts. Even meditation, and then hypnosis, which they don't really talk about on the exam anymore. They cut that out. So if you're taking the exam, it's not going to be on there. But it is kind of interesting to talk about if hypnosis is a thing. So, with states of consciousness, probably the most in-depth stuff that I think we look at in this chapter is going to be the stages of sleep and the waves that go along with each and things like that. So, when you're sleeping, your perceptual window is not fully shut. So, when you are asleep, you're not totally oblivious and unconscious to the world around you. So, hopefully most of us, when we're laying in bed and we fall asleep, you don't fall off the bed when you sleep, right? You somehow know where the edge is, and you don't fall asleep even if you're like kind of tossing and turning in your sleep, or even if you fall asleep right on the edge of the mattress, you don't ever take the turn that knocks you off. And that's because our perceptual window in our brain is open enough that we're aware of our surroundings to some extent. We could talk about it too with the idea that maybe I ignore the busy cars behind my house, or like we live by a fire station. So if ambulances and fire trucks, get sent out in the middle of the night, when I first moved in, I definitely noticed it all the time, but now I don't. But if my kid wakes up in the middle of the night and I even hear like mom being whispered, I'm like up in a sec, even if I'm in a dead sleep. And then the sound of your name is something else that can wake you up. So, when your parents are struggling to wake you up in the mornings, just tell them to say your name. It could help jar you right out of that deep sleep. When we look at this stuff, we know that we can hook you up to an EEG. So hopefully you remember that from first unit. An EEG just shows brainwave activity. And so if you're knocked out and asleep and we have you in this EEG, the wires all attached to your head, and we start talking to you, while you're in sleep, we'll start seeing different brainwave patterns. Like you can tell that your brain is listening, whether it's comprehended or not, but you can tell it's listening. Your brain's picking up the activity. So it's not shut off, it's not shut down, it's not ignoring the world around you. Now, when it comes to you guys, we talked about these with the memory unit, circadian rhythms, the idea that our bodies run off of this like 24-hour cycle biological clock. But teenagers, we would say like, yours is like a 25-hour clock because you're different, right? So like right now it is 10:10 p.m. and I should not be awake because my circadian rhythm said I was done dealing like 2 hours ago. But I'm behind on work, so I got to get it done. Versus you guys are probably sitting at home at 10 in the evening being like, I'm fine. I could sleep, in a couple hours, but right now I'm not tired. And so these circadian rhythms deal with body temp, arousal, alertness, wakefulness, all those types of things, and kind of your energy throughout the day. And that's what we had used as our like kind of definition or descriptor when we talked about it in regular psychology, and saying how like 4 p.m. you guys have brains that are kind of tired that say, hey, I want a nap. And then my adult brain says 4 p.m. I couldn't sleep if I wanted to. But then 10 p.m. hits and I'm toast, I'm exhausted, and you guys get propped up at the end of the night to want to stay up really late and then sleep in really late. So maybe if you don't have classes meeting at 8 a.m. On these Zoom meetings, you guys might be letting your circadian rhythms go all free-range teenager on you, like I said. And since you might not have work, you might not have school on certain days, you might be just following your natural inclination for these circadian rhythms. Now, the fun fact is, there is one way to alter circadian rhythms. So they are biologically based off of the sun. Before we had false light and things like that, the only thing your body would respond to would be the sun. When it came up, you'd be sleeping in your home or your cave or wherever, depending on what time period we're talking about here. And when the sun would come up, it activates these proteins in your retinas. And the proteins in your retinas basically tell melatonin to shut down, to stop being made. Melatonin is what makes us sleepy. So when you start getting tired at night, your body naturally produces melatonin to help you fall asleep. Or maybe some people take melatonin because they seem to not have enough or they need the extra help falling asleep. But when we are alerted by light, it shuts melatonin production down. And it used to be, like I said, just driven by the sun, but now we have false lights. So the best thing your parents can do if they are trying to get you awake and you're ignoring them and rolling back over is make sure your covers aren't over your face, pull those off, and then turn on your bedroom light, and you are toast because it'll stop the activation of melatonin due to this false light in your brain registering it like, the sun's up, it's time to get up for the day. And you have trouble falling back asleep once those lights are flipped on. So like I had said, we had talked about this already when we did memory, but to kind of relapse it again, this 25-hour cycle, you're up later in the night, you sleep later in the day, and when you're in your 20s, you make this shift from being a night owl to more of a morning lark, where you're not going to stay up as late and you're going to wake up earlier. So like me and my friend were just talking about it because now we are officially thinking we're old people. Because we were saying how, like, yeah, even if I could sleep in, so, like, on Thursday, I don't have any Zoom meetings with students. Hypothetically, I could sleep into whatever time I wanted. Even if I pawned my kid off on somebody who wasn't going to wake me up, my brain would still wake me up probably by 7 and be, like, ready to hang out for the day and ready to go. And sorry, my cats are, like, fighting in the background right now. But that's just how our brains work. And he was saying, yeah, I couldn't even fall asleep. I can't stay up late, and I can't sleep in anymore. It just doesn't work. So you guys, unfortunately for you, will make that shift eventually. And I'm so sorry about my cats right now. This is the epitome of crazy cat lady. I think it's in the developments behind me. So sleep, super, super important for us. And that's why we talked about circadian rhythms being important for like memory. You need sleep to be able to process. And you guys with school, how it typically is, not in this format, but in a traditional school setting, it doesn't really fit into your window of when you need your sleep, right? You want to stay up late, sleep in late. School doesn't help you function in that because it's built on more of like how the adults function, because adults created the system and adults have to work the system. So sleep is very, very, very important. We have a hard time trying to alter our circadian rhythms. So we'll talk about sleep and what happens when we don't get it. But we are, as humans, just really struggle to change our sleep habits. It just doesn't work that way. We have too hard of a time trying to readjust. All right, let's see if I can get this done in 5 minutes. So sleep stages. About every 90 minutes, we pass through all 4 stages of sleep. Awake does not count as a stage of sleep, right? Because you're awake. We go stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then REM. In your book, it will say stage 3 and 4 because when that book was written, they said stage 3 and 4 were separate, and now we're realizing they're super close. Like, they used to count this portion as stage 3 with a couple of long waves, and then this was stage 4. They're close enough that now stage 3 and 4 are just called stage 3. And then we have REM. So when we look at non-REM 1, so this is just stage 1, it just means non-REM. It means it's not REM sleep, which we'll talk about REM in a moment. So non-REM or stage 1, these are going to be marked by, they call them alpha waves. So here's how it goes. Awake, beta waves, right? Beta waves show we are wide awake. Alpha waves are the beginnings of this stage 1 or falling, like being drowsy. So as we start getting kind of sleepy, we turn to alpha waves. And then this is the point in sleep where just if you've ever laid down for a moment and you're just starting to fall asleep, and if you've ever had one of like those falling dreams where you feel like, oh, I just fell asleep, and I fell off a curb, or I fell off a cliff, and you jump yourself awake. It happens during this stage. Some people don't have the falling sensation. They have the floating, like they're floating off their bed. And oddly enough, this is typically when most people will report alien abductions occurred and they were floated off their bed into the spacecraft. It's typically like, 10 minutes after I fell asleep, which would put you about in stage 1. Stage 2, or non-REM 2, lasts for around 20 minutes, but the big thing here is it's marked by sleep spindles. During this time, you have theta waves that are forming. So beta is wide awake, alpha is falling asleep, stage 1. Then you have theta, that is stage 2, non-REM 2. And you have these sleep spindles. So as we look at EEGs, which is all these things that we're looking at, all these lines are EEG recordings, we see it's going, and then right here where I have my arrow, all of a sudden the arrow goes like really fast, and then it goes back to being steady, and then really fast in these little bursts. That is a sleep spindle. We have non-REM 3, which in your book, stage 3, stage 4. These are delta waves. Delta waves are called they call them slow wave sleep or deep sleep. It's either way. They're very slow and elongated waves that we only see in stage 3. And it just shows you're in a deep sleep. So that's the other kind of name for it. When people are in this sleep, it might be like you fell asleep and people say, hey, did you hear that thunderstorm last night that went through? And you're like, no, I heard nothing. It could have been because that big thunder was during this chunk of your sleep where it seems like you're really not going to be woken up by much. This is a stage where we do have kids that sleepwalk a lot, or they're wetting their beds because they're just not being alerted to wake up because they're so tired and they're so deep asleep. And then we have REM, which is rapid eye movement. So stage 1, 2, and 3 go non-REM 1, non-REM 2, non-REM 3, and then we have REM. REM, rapid eye movement. So if you've ever been asleep next to someone and they fell asleep before you and they're in a really deep sleep, you can see their eyes moving around under their lids. This is a sign that they're in REM sleep. If you look at the waves, there's really not a name we give these, but they look very similar to the beta waves that look like you're wide awake. The way this was discovered was a man was fixing an EEG machine and hooked his son up to it while he was sleeping, and he noticed that when this would happen, his kid's eyes were darting around real weird, but the machine was reading that his kid was awake, and he was like, he's not awake, he's really asleep. And what we found out was that was actually REM sleep. Your eyes move around and you have these very, very vivid dreams, which is super odd. And so the cool thing is if you have like a Fitbit, for example, or a smartwatch, you can actually track with this when you're in each stage. And if you can let it read your heart rate, you'll even get a better indication, because when you're in REM sleep, your heartbeat speeds up really fast. But we'll go over this more because I'm about out of time. So we will go more about REM in the next set of 15 minutes. All right, thanks.